I'd realized that I was starting to miss the UK, and Ghana back then wasn't very developed, especially where I was living. I didn't really have a lot of access to the internet. First one I did in 2018 was more or less a failure. I only had like my friends turn up, it was like 5 people. Second one I did was a success. Community is now winning. Community is the win now. It's not about number of followers you have. Wait a minute. There's no dedicated podcast where I can learn about Ghanaian creators, entrepreneurs, and founders.
Yeah.
How about I set one up?
You're not defined by where you come from.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big message that I always want to tell people.
Like you have to be able to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
When you grow up in ends, you don't realize it when you're confident, but you have an audacity to do things that ordinarily most people wouldn't be willing to do.
Welcome back to the Takeover Experience. We've got a special guest in the building. How are you doing today, Adrian?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing fantastic. I'm just, surviving summer. Surviving summer.
Surviving summer. Madness. So yeah, you know what's crazy, right? So we met at the podcast show, but I told you that when we met that I had heard about your podcast.
Yeah.
Sound of Accra.
Yeah.
Before I met you. So that's why I came up to you. I was like, oh yeah, it's cool. Because it was cool to like meet other podcasters. There wasn't that many other black podcasters there. I feel like we were quite like thin and far between. So I was like, okay, cool. This is a brother that I can introduce myself to.
The chemistry we had was insane. Like, we linked up in day 2 as well of the podcast show. It's like, I didn't want that week to end. Like, I just wanted it to be a whole week boot camp of podcast. Of course, you've got people to go home to, but you know what I mean? It's just like, I wanted it to go on and on and on. I loved it, man.
Yeah.
Meeting people like yourself. It was amazing, man.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, no. It was weird because it's like we just clicked like that. Like honestly, it was mad. And then it's like we got a bit of a collective on the second day, which was funny.
We started to recruit people, didn't we?
Yeah, we started to recruit people, which is fun. Like because it's like we all got to talk about our challenges, our struggles, and then I think the whole Creators Connect thing was quite good as well. But how did you find it? How did you find the podcast show?
Podcast show, you know what? I think for me, because this was my second one. I know you've been to one before, right?
Yeah. No, this was my first. Yeah, this is the first one ever. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. So for me, this is my first time at the podcast show. So, not my second time at the podcast show. So I already knew what to expect.
Yeah.
I already knew it was going to be a bit overwhelming and so many workshops, classes, talks going on that it's hard to keep up with everything. You just have to do your best, going to as much as you can and talking to as many people as you can.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I definitely thought that I was able to speak to and network better this year. Definitely a lot more black podcasters, which was great to see. Meeting people such as yourself, in Zube, seeing, I think it's Uwe from, I can't remember the name of his podcast. But yeah, there's so many black podcasters out there, which is really, really good to see, and then the +44.
Yeah, that was good. That was good. Yeah, ZZ Mills, Chucky, and Sadman. Yeah, it was good to see them as well.
See them there as well, which is fantastic. So I loved it. My usual gripes about the podcast show. I wish they recorded all of the other talks and workshops. So when you're busy networking with someone, you don't have to have any kind of worries or burdens. You can have peace of mind knowing that there's recorded talks and workshops that you can, go to later on. Because for me, it's all well and good networking and going to talks here and there, but I want to get everything out of the show I can. I want to learn as much as possible because I only want to get better and better at doing podcasting.
Yeah, it's true. I felt like for me personally, it was mad overwhelming. It was like, I remember, I think telling you and telling other people, there was like 5 talks at the same time.
Wow.
If there was like 11, like 5-6 talks at 11, 2 of them I want to go to. And I'm like, okay, how do I decide which one? Or I want to meet somebody there to potentially see if I can get them onto a podcast or just learn from them because I'm just curious, right? Yeah. Maybe they're a big name in the podcasting scene. So I just found it really difficult. And then the ones that you did think, okay, I don't want to name company names, but by companies, certain big companies feel, it's going to be sick. They're going to give you something innovative, some great tip. And it was boring. You're like, nah, why? Like, and these are the biggest,
I know.
trailblazing in our kind of, community, and that's what you're getting. You're like, oh, okay. So I liked it overall. I thought it was great. It was great to network, as we talked about before. I feel like I got some good tips. The ones that, and it's so crazy. The creator rooms were the best for sure, but it was always packed. You could never get in there. They only had I think 15 people. They're the ones that were the most packed, people couldn't get into, and then the ones that were on the bigger floor, barely anybody there.
Crazy.
So yeah, it was mad. It was actually mad. So what kind of lesson did you feel like you got from the podcast show? Like the number one lesson that you learned from it?
Number one lesson I got from the podcast show. Wow. I think the big lesson for me is witnessing the potential of advertising.
Okay.
So it's understanding how big the advertising industry is in podcasting and how a whole bunch of money went into the advertising industry. Reason why I'm saying that is that I went to 2 talks in particular, and one was by Spotify. And one was by Acast. So the CEO of Acast was there. So for those of you who don't know what Acast is, so Acast essentially is a podcast host distributor, but they usually tend to specialize in podcasters that are doing, I think, 100,000 downloads and up, which I haven't done yet, but I have students that have done, which is great. But anyway, what Acast and Spotify were talking about was essentially the amount of money pumped into advertising. So you have brands like EE, etc., who put their trust in podcast advertising when they notice that certain areas such as commercial TV, terrestrial TV, etc., digital TV, advertising money that they were putting into those areas, it was declining. They noticed a decline, especially I think around the pandemic or just after the pandemic, and then they decided to put money into podcasting because they realized I think March 2020 onwards, there was a boom in podcasting, I think, in that particular period. And then what happened was that they noticed that a lot more listeners were driven to podcasting. So if we put our money where the attention is, then we're going to get better return on investment. And not only are we going to get that, you're probably going to get repeat customers and more loyal customers, because with podcasting, it's a very intimate type of content where you're going to get people coming back again and again and again. And, that's opportunity for advertisers. So for me, that was the biggest takeaway, just understanding how big the podcast advertising industry is.
Yeah, and it's like, I feel like it's still like podcasting, even though we were talking about offline, like we feel like it's saturated. I feel like it's still very new. We can compare it to like, I don't know, like we were talking about TV streaming is an infant compared to that, Yeah. I think who's the longest? My podcast history isn't that best, but I'll say Joe Rogan's probably one of the first. He was one of the first people. I know there's probably people before him.
There's people that have been around before him, but I think in terms of like well-known, long-running podcast, he's definitely up there.
Yeah,
I think he started.
Like
I think
10 years ago, plus, right?
Yeah, I think early 2010s.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I created my own podcast by accident in 2010.
Is it?
You understand? So maybe I started at the same time.
What was it called?
It was called In the Views. So essentially, I used to have a radio show at university.
Okay, this is starting to make sense.
Radio show University, Keele University. Anyone listening from Keele University, shout out to you.
What university was it?
Keele University. KWELE.
Wait, Keele.
Stoke-on-Trent, near Alton Towers.
Okay.
That's the best way to describe it, essentially. Bang smack in the middle of England.
Okay.
Just off the M6, essentially. And biggest campus in the country, fun fact. Anyway, so I had a radio show at campus. It's called In the Mix. Essentially, we used to play R&B and hip hop. And what will happen is that I would get guests, me and my co-host, Toby. Shout out to Toby, who's listening. One of my best friends. He lives in Birmingham. And we will get we will get guests in sometimes, to come and feature on the show. So sometimes we get musicians performing, rappers from Birmingham. Sometimes we get singers come in and do a live set from the university. And then what I will do at times where I needed to create a space for content was that I would, go around campus with a dictaphone interviewing students about different types of things at uni. So maybe I'll do a podcast on healthy eating. I did one podcast on Blackberries, technology and the rise of Blackberries, iPhones, etc.
That's so interesting.
And I did another podcast just talking about certain things that were going, certain trends that were taking place on campus,
Right.
that I picked up. So those are my first 3 actual podcast episodes that I created, and then I uploaded them to Facebook and I played them live on radio. But I didn't realize what I was actually doing was actually podcasting. You understand? But what I did was that all I wanted to do was I wanted to create content for my radio show, and it ended up being, you know, some type of podcast content, if you will. But it was only 3 episodes, but I knew I had that bug even back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, mad. Okay, cool. We're going to rewind back and we're going to get back to the uni story, right?
Yeah.
Okay, before we start, who is Adrian?
Oh, man. Okay. So I think for me, who is Adrian? So I think for me, I'm a tech nerd, I would say.
Okay.
Tech nerd. You know, I'm passionate about podcasting. And I think for really and truly, I'm passionate about, you know, just using technology and software, you know, just to really, you know, make impact on my life and other people's lives, and to really support small to medium businesses as well. Yeah, I don't know what more I could say.
It's up to you. I always say to people when I ask them that question,
Yeah.
I don't dictate what your response should be.
Yeah.
I'm just fascinated what the response is.
The response is,
But I love I love hearing what people's response is and what their perception of that question is, which is why I always have that question in there. You know, the listeners might want me to change it, but I may never change it because the answer is always different. It's always answered from a different angle. And you have listened, actually, I think the episode, and we're going to talk about this, I think we both had Alfred on our podcast. I don't know if I was even asking the question back then like that. I can't remember. I'm going to have to go back and listen.
Shout out to Alfred.
Yeah, shout out to Alfred as well. So let's talk about your story. So I guess if people didn't guess from the name of your podcast, where are your parents from?
Ghana.
Ghana, yeah. And Ghana, in terms of like your ties to it, were you born there? Were you born here in the UK?
Oh, yes. I was born here in
Okay.
the UK. And essentially, you know, I lived in London, born, raised in London. When I got to year 7 in the UK, my family decided that they were going to relocate to Ghana. I went to Ghana in the year 2000. So that was my first experience of Christmas in Ghana in the year 2000. You know, way before, you know, it's way before now where it's trending to go to Christmas in Ghana. I experienced it way before everybody else. And I was like, oh, this is really, really good. I want to live here. So of course, the following year, 2001, I moved to Ghana for 3 years to live there with my family. So I went to school there, everything. You know,
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
I even caught the Ghanaian accent, you know, for a period of time. And, you know, it got to a point where, you know, I'd realized that I was starting to miss the UK. And Ghana back then wasn't very developed at all. So, you know, it was still up and coming. You know, it was still had a long way to go in terms of like, you know, like commercial development, infrastructure and things like that. So it was still, you know, up and coming. And of course we didn't have things like the high speed internet, and, you know, cable TV wasn't really as easily accessible as it is now. So all these types of things. So yeah, so I ended up getting bored after I finished one part of school in Ghana. And then what happened was I moved back to the UK in 2004, and then, you know, I continued to you know, live in the UK again. But then when I moved back to the UK, I couldn't get back into my old school because all of the schools in London had been booked out. They've been taken.
So,
Yes, they've been taken up. So me and my family decided to move outside of London. So I ended up living in Hertfordshire for 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, which at first, you know, I was like, okay, I'm moving away from London. I'm going to feel, you know, like I'm distant, cold feet, whatever. But then I actually enjoyed it. It ended up being a blessing, because if I hadn't moved to Hertfordshire, I may have gone down a different path, because going to school in Hertfordshire, what that provided for me in St. Albans rather, was that I was able to maybe be exposed to, you know, music, to, you know, extracurricular activities, basketball, swimming, etc. That I probably wouldn't have been able to take part in, you know, if I to continue to live in London because of the environment that I was based around in, you know. So, you know, because of that, I was able to, you know, like get into music school and, you know, take drum lessons, piano lessons, etc., which kind of like helped to prepare me to become a type of music producer when in my past. You know, and then, you know, when I took a trip to America, came back, and I decided that I wanted to kind of like take music seriously. So, you know, I got an A-level in music technology. I won the music technology awards, and then I ended up, you know, performing at Hertfordshire University, you know, as an back then artist, you know. When I got to my first year of university, I went back to perform, and then I, you know, continued on university. So yeah, so it's been a wild ride. You know, my story is quite interesting, you know, back and forth between the UK and Ghana, and you know, and then moving outside London to, you know, an area that I'd never lived before, and living there for, you know, for quite a number of years before going to university. And I really feel like, you know, God's put these things in place to get me to where I am today. And I always kind of like think to myself, if I wasn't able to, if I was able to go back to that school and I was able to stay in London the way it is, I probably wouldn't be the Adrian I am today.
You think so?
No, I definitely agree.
Why? What was the area? What area was it that you were in before?
So it was Northwest London, so
Okay.
so Edgware. That's where my school was.
Okay.
But I think the influences I had in my first year in school. So I only experienced 1 year of secondary school in London before I moved to Ghana and before I moved to Hertfordshire when I relocated back to the UK. And what I'm saying is that I think the influences that I was surrounded by in London at the time, when I was in year 7, they weren't really good influences, and they weren't influences that would stimulate me to develop my skill sets in different areas. Whereas when I was in Hertfordshire, I was in an environment where I was encouraged to develop on certain skill sets, and I was not secluded, but I didn't have a lot of friends. But what I had was a drive to maybe work on, you know, my craft. So working on piano skills, working on drum lessons, you know, working on how to be a music producer, different things. So I was able to work on my craft and develop my skill sets as a person, which, you know, I have no regrets, you know, living in St. Albans for that.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Wow. Only 1 year of secondary school in the UK.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. So I guess, and I don't feel like you lost out on anything from the sounds of it. I don't feel like there was any kind of disadvantage with it. It sounds like you got a very well-rounded experience of like living in Ghana. I guess from your perspective, because I've lived in Nigeria and
Really?
Yeah, I've lived in Nigeria for a year.
Okay, nice.
And I've traveled to various parts of Africa whilst I was a bit younger, now a little bit older too. I guess for you, like, what kind of things what were the differences for you? And I guess how did that do you feel like there was a bit of an adjustment that you had to have, like moving to Ghana and then moving back to the UK?
Yeah, definitely was an adjustment. Like, it was quite interesting when I moved back to the UK in 2004 after living in Ghana for, you know, 3 years. I felt like, you know, I was kind of like living in the past. Like, I felt like I had to catch up with 3 years of what happened in Western society. Because when I was living in Ghana, especially where I was living, I didn't really have a lot of access to the internet. I didn't have many friends. I had a neighbor, you know. I spent a lot of time doing outdoor activities, cycling, you know, hiking, walking around, you know, whatever it was. But I felt like society kind of like moved on, and I've been stuck in the past, and I had to catch up with what's happened in media and music world, what's happened in entertainment world, what's happened in the internet. There's just so much development, and I felt like, you know, the way I was living in life in Ghana, I had kind of like missed all of that. So that was probably a huge, you know, factor in terms of what was like, you know, missing or where I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so interesting. So then you decided to... Did you decide to come back to the UK?
Yeah, I decided to come.
You decided? What? Your parents let you decide that at that young age?
Yeah. I mean, they weren't. I mean, my parents, they're quite easygoing to an extent. Of course, you've got African parents to an extent. But yeah, I mean, they're quite open. So, you know, I kind of felt that I was falling behind with what was happening in the West. And, I started to kind of like get a little bit frustrated with Ghana and missing life in the UK and maybe the convenience of being able to access certain things or do certain things. And I felt like I don't really have a calling in Ghana. Let me just go back to the UK and, go back to how I was living.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Mad.
Yeah.
And then so you mentioned that you obviously went to school in Hertfordshire. You felt like that was like had a good impact on you. And I to be fair, I completely understand that. Then music, right? You said you were interested in music.
Yeah. So I'll tell you this. So I took a trip to America when I was 15. I got one of my childhood friends relocated to America like when we were young. And essentially he basically was making beats. So when I got to America, like I discovered that he was making beats on a software called Fruit Loops, which is now FL Studio. Fruit Loops.
Yeah,
love it. So when I discovered music production on a laptop, I was obsessed. I turned up the opportunity to go and watch Hustle and Flow at the time in America when it was out in the cinema, to stay at his apartment and make beats in Virginia. Do you understand? So it was crazy. And he also had a rap group called Bad Boy Crew called the BBC.
Okay.
Yeah, which was short for the BBC.
Okay.
And I kind of got involved with them and was listening to them, and I think these two things come together. I was like, I want to learn how to freestyle, and I think maybe 8 Mile maybe had come out maybe a few years before or something like that.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, I want to learn how to freestyle, learn how to rap, and become a producer. I wanted to kind of like follow in Pharrell's footsteps kind of thing, who I looked up to at the time in terms of music artist / producer kind of thing. I wanted a piece of that. So yeah, that's kind of like where that came from. So when I go back to the UK, I decided, look, when I get to start my A-levels, I'm taking music technology, anything to do with music, so that I can, become a music producer. Okay. And I remember Pharrell when he was saying that if you want to become a music producer, he always recommends learning instruments. So Pharrell was like, oh, go and take piano lessons, go and get drum lessons, and use these skills to kind of like form part of you as a music producer. So I listened to him and I took piano lessons, I took drum lessons.
See, that's impact right there.
That's helped me in terms of like, learning instruments and being able to make better beats, and that's translated into so many different things.
Did you go to uni on the back of like finishing your music what's it called, music technology?
Yes,
back then.
So I took music technology at A-levels, and then I decided that I wanted to become a music producer. So I decided that I wanted to take it at university as well. So I took the same subject as at university as a degree, combined with business management as well. Can
I ask you something?
Go on.
What are your parents saying about this? Because I think you're the only person I heard on the podcast, and I love it, by the way. I love this, by the way. But look, music?
Yeah.
Like, they were like, yeah, calm, go and do that.
Do you know what it was? I think for me, I kind of like told them that, look, this is my passion, but I want to mix it with purpose. Right. So let me take music, but let me take business management also, so that, the parents are happy. Okay. So I have a fallback plan. Okay. Understand? So look, Mom, if this doesn't work out, this is what I'm going to do. Okay. I'm going to work in business just to some extent. Love that. It worked. It worked. I didn't end up become a music producer professionally. You understand? I won some awards here and there. At university, at school, etc., outside of school. But what it has done is that it's kind of laid foundations for me to pursue various creative endeavors. Of course, podcasting is one of them, and things like that, where you learn how to do certain things in modules throughout university. So I feel like all of these different things have kind of like been the building blocks to where I am today.
Yeah, I love that your parents supported you with that, and I think it's important that they support your passion, and I love that you are pragmatic as well. Right? You're saying, okay, cool, this is what I want to do, this is my passion, but also this is like my fallback plan. I think too many people don't have a secondary plan because they want to believe that they're like, I wholeheartedly believe in this and I'm going to succeed in this. Succeed or else. They don't have a backup plan because they think it's bad to have a backup plan. They feel like, okay, maybe if I have a backup plan, I'm not really putting my all into it. And I don't think that's true. I think it's always good to have a backup plan just in case, right? If plan A doesn't work, then you got plan B, then you got plan C, right? It's no different to me coming to the studio and say, look, I want to get here in half an hour, right? cool, but there might be traffic, so I'll just have to take another route, right?
True.
It doesn't stop you from doing that. So I think it's important. I love the fact that you had like a plan B. I think that's important. So you ended up finishing it. What happened with the whole music producing? Why didn't you say that you didn't end up doing it? Did you decide not to pursue it?
Yeah, so I think with music production, so I think halfway through my time at university, I realized, how kind of like dark the industry was getting at the time.
You say dark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dark. Yeah. When I kind of like looked more into the industry and just as I was kind of involved in it to an extent. And also my best friend, was also, a music producer, and we're living together throughout our whole time at university. So I also kind of like, heard his opinions and his thoughts and stories and experiences he was sharing, and as much as he wanted to be a music producer, he also kind of walked away from it and decided to pursue other ventures that were kind of similar but more kind of like commercial focused. So when I heard that from him, because I looked up to him a lot, and when I kind of like also took my faith in God seriously as well. I think in the second year university, my faith in God kind of like took like the front seat, and certain things started to become like a conflict of interest for me as well, like making music for certain people, and even having my own radio show as well, bringing on artists and playing certain songs. I think it started to become a conflict of interest for me, so I kind of took a step back from radio and music production, and I just thought, okay, cool, look, I'm gonna have to find some kind of career that works out, that makes sense for me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like when you say dark, is it, I don't even want to pin you to a corner here, because we're not trying to do all that controversial stuff.
Yeah.
But when you say dark, do you mean in terms of like the subject of the songs, the artists themselves, or just the industry as a whole? Because you hear stuff like, you hear the industry is a lot of, people get selected.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about really the effort that you make. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of luck involved and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. When you said dark, I was thinking that maybe there wasn't just a lot of opportunities, that they wasn't given a lot of opportunities out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So I think for me, it was a combination of various things. So one was that, of course, the industry, especially at that time, where I could see where it was going, and did I want to contribute to that? And I knew if I wanted to be like wildly successful in the industry, I would probably have to go down a certain path that would kind of conflict with my beliefs and my values, and I didn't want to do that. And also I kind of realized, how hard also that it would also be to break out to be a music producer and to make a certain amount of money that would kind of like, really, really sustain me. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I think while, I used to subscribe to a magazine called Scratch.
Okay.
It was like a magazine about music production, like music producers from America, so like the Just Blazers, the Neptunes, all these different people. Timberland, Scott Storch, all these people. And, I used to read that magazine. I'll get the subscription every month. They'll get sent to my house. I'll read it. I'll see what the latest equipment is, the latest producers, what they're up to, the money they're making, etc. And I always used to think, okay, cool, I hope that could be me one day. But then I think when I actually kind of got into it, it was like, you know what, this is actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. So I think it was a combination of how hard it is to break into the industry, but also it's, seeing where the industry is going, and, and seeing where I was going as well. And it's like, do I want to be a part of that? Or maybe I should walk away and focus on something else that I can enjoy, So I think for me, doing radio was great. I think halfway through university, I was like, okay, cool. I think I want to be a radio host. But then when I kind of looked into it a bit more, it's like, but I want to make a certain amount of money. So maybe I don't want to be a radio host. So of course, years down the line, just seeing where podcasting is going, it's kind of got me excited where, where I wanted to be as a music producer or an artist or a radio host. I felt like, podcasting has given me opportunity now to be able to pursue all of that, all kind of combined in a way. I completely agree. It's so interesting because like when you mention like the whole industry and stuff, I feel like as a creative, especially if you're trying to get into the industry, I feel like sometimes you might have to compromise certain stuff, right? And you don't want to do it
but you got to do it because you got to put food on the table. You
That's
got to
the
pay your
word.
bills, right?
Yeah.
And I think because of that, a lot of people get taken advantage of. Obviously, I'm not in that. I'm not in the music industry, but you hear stories, you've seen stories of people getting, you know, people maybe that have not had any money come into the music industry. They get signed to a crap deal because they don't have a lawyer. It's the most money they've ever seen. Yeah, I remember seeing one a few years ago of a rapper. How many? I think he got signed to do 3 or 4 albums? I think he only got paid like 50,000 or something.
Wow.
Crap like that. So you guys might remember who I'm talking about. Like, if I've gotten this wrong, I'm just saying it off the top of my head. But like that kind of thing is like, you know, it's just like you have to compromise sometimes. And I think it's tough, and I understand why you might not want to put yourself in that position. And it's brave, to be fair, to be like, you're gonna just get yourself out of that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll tell you what. I mean, you don't always have to come, but I think the playing field has leveled now.
For sure. Yeah.
Not just for podcasters or other creatives and content creators, also for music artists, right? I'll tell you why, right? Someone like, do you know Ryan Leslie?
Yeah.
Ryan Leslie, he's a like artist producer, another
artist producer,
I used to
business
look
guy.
up to back then. I mean, even I kind of like still admire his work, right? Even yesterday, I found out that he's releasing a new album next month. And do you know what he's up to now? Do you know what Ryan Leslie's up to? Do you know what his business model is around music now? It's genius now. It's, do you know his product Superphone? You know,
I've heard about something about the numbers and
So let me break it down. So Ryan Leslie, right? Many years ago, you know, he released his debut album called Ryan Leslie, right? So he did that. And then he released the second album. I can't remember what it's called, right? I just remember the album being kind of greenish. And basically he went to the label he was signed to. I think he was signed to Sony at the time, right? And this is many years ago. And it was like, hey, Sony, why isn't it that my album isn't doing this the same level of sales that my previous album did, or even excelled it? Don't you have access to the people that bought my first album? And they're like, nah, sorry, Apple doesn't give this data. We can't get access to it. We can't share this data with you, blah, 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 blah. He was like, that's ridiculous. You understand? So he got really annoyed at that because he knows that, of course, Sony's going to take their cut, the marketer, the promoter going to take their cut, and he's going to be left with whatever is left with, right? So he was like, he needs to kind of like cut the middleman and find a solution which will enable him to speak directly to his audience. So you know what he did? He launched Superphone, right? Now with Superphone, what you can do is, Superphone is basically like a super phone. It's literally what it does, does what it says on the tin. I don't know if you know what a CRM is, a customer relationship management tool. Yeah. Essentially, it's like it's a CRM on steroids for your smartphone. So what you can do with Superphone is that anyone can put their phone number into someone's Superphone account, and what will happen is that it will literally automatically kind of like communicate with all of the people that are signed up to Superphone. So for example, let's say I am from Austria and I put my phone number in Ryan Leslie's Superphone phone book, right? Ryan Leslie, and then what I'm also doing is I'm putting information about my date, my birthday, where I live, you know, all these different types of information, my age, my gender, So what Superphone will do is that it will take all of these things into account. It will text you when the album is out. When Ryan Leslie goes on tour, you will get direct messages and emails about it. When is your birthday? You get a text, hey Paul, happy birthday. Hope you have a great day. When Ryan Leslie's in your area, you get a text, hey Paul, I'm actually in Austria. I'm actually in Vienna. Do you wanna come and catch up with me or something? So literally, he's changed the game with how artists speak to the fans directly.
I love that.
You understand? And as a result, he's able to make way more money than he did with record labels. That's what he said. Yeah,
because so it's cut out the middleman, isn't it?
It's cut out the middleman. So now Ryan Leslie's he doesn't even drop his album on the platform, streaming platforms no more. It's literally direct to consumer, D2Z.
And so you don't even need as much sales either.
You don't even need much sales. He hasn't had an album out in Spotify, Apple Podcasts Apple for God knows how long. Yeah. Genius.
I love that, man. I feel like something like that will happen in podcasting too, and it's quite important.
I guess you have like Patreon, you have platforms like this. I mean, even Patreon. I mean, there's
even
now
YouTube
other
membership
platforms
as well.
I mean, there's so many membership platforms out there, you know, where you can communicate directly with your listeners and build a community around your fans. And this is the age that we're in now, where community is now winning.
Yeah.
Community is the win now. It's not about number of followers you have, or the type of contract you sign a record label. It's now building a raving community around your fans, your listeners, your audience, etc. And then giving genuine value and building genuine value around that. And in return, you get you do get rewarded from that. Whether it's monetary or whatever.
Yeah, love that. All right, let's talk about your first podcast, Sound of Accra. I guess, what is it about first?
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us what it's about.
All right.
I guess, what was the inspiration for it, and why did you decide to podcast and not anything else?
Yeah, great question. So so I actually answered this question on one of the videos on the YouTube channel. But so essentially the Sound of Accra podcast, so it came about on the back of a couple of failed projects. Sometimes you need to fail a few times to get to a product or service that actually works and strikes a chord, right? So what I wanted to do was that, so in Ghana, right, I wanted to always come up with something to kind of like community, to kind of contribute to the diasporan community. So what I started off doing, Atto, was that I started, working on a blog. I had a blog called londontoaccra.com. I thought I'll be able to, jump on the bandwagon of, the most popular, flight route for British Airways being London to Accra, trying to hop and piggyback on the traffic that they were getting and the bookings that we're getting, trying to leverage that kind of name to try and get traffic to a website where I can talk about maybe everything to do with like maybe business, how-tos in Ghana, etc., etc. So that online magazine kind of failed. I launched it, I shared it with my Ghanaian community. Shout out to YGP, Young Ghanaian Professionals. Kind of failed. So I was like, all right, cool. What's next? And I realized, I love networking in Ghana. I realized there was a gap in the market for a lack of networking activity in Ghana during the Christmas period. So I decided after that, you know what? I'm going to launch a networking event where the diasporas can meet together, because you get a lot of diasporans flying in Accra during Christmas from all around the world. I was like, you know what? Let's network. Let's all come together and meet each other. So I launched that networking event in Accra in 2018. I think it's the first one I did. First one I did in 2018 was more or less a failure. I only had like my friends turn up. It was like 5 people. Second one I did was a success. I had, I think, over 25 to 30 people turn up for the second one. Had lots of people from all over the world, Canada, UK, you name it, right? West Africa as well. And then I was like, this is fantastic, but I want to keep the networking going, because it's like, it's no good doing a networking event once a year, Atto, and not being able to kind of continue networking after that. Like, you want to keep momentum going, you want the buzz going. So I was like, you know what? How about I launch a podcast where I can continue to network with other Ghanaian entrepreneurs and creatives, not just diasporans, but let me, interview Ghanaian entrepreneurs and creators. And the reason why I focus on that, Atto, is because if you go on YouTube, you type in the word Ghana or Accra, right? So many pieces of content, interviews, whatever pop up, right? But I realized when I look, because I'm a heavy podcast listener, and I have been since 2010, right? So I've been following the podcast market for a long time now. And I noticed, wait a minute, there's no dedicated podcast where I can learn about Ghanaian creators, entrepreneurs, and founders. Yeah. How about I set one up? And I always had my friend Toby, one of my best friends, Toby, shout out to Toby. He was like, Adrian, you're really good at radio. And had other people say that as well. Why didn't you, start your own radio show or whatever? And then I was like, and then those kind of thoughts came back to me. I was like, you know what? How about I start a podcast promoting Ghanaian creators, founders, entrepreneurs? Okay. It just clicked. It made perfect sense. Yeah. Nobody was doing it. Nobody had nothing, in that space. I launched my first podcast in January 2020. My first 2 guests were, I think, one of my cousins in Ghana, and my first ever guest was from the final networking event I did in 2019, at the end of 2019. Okay, it was amazing.
All roads led to that. Then basically everything that you did, all the what you would classify as failure. I don't know, man. My definition of failure, I mean, everybody's definition is different. Failure and success, and I feel like things take time as well, especially as a creative. I think you got to be extra patient as a creative. Most people aren't overnight successes. Yeah, either. I guess what's been the most interesting interview you've had?
Oof, that's a good one. That's a very, 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 very good one, because we've done over I mean, we've got hundreds of episodes now. Well, not hundreds, but we got like almost 130 something episodes.
130
episodes, yeah.
Wow.
So many. I mean, not every single podcast episode
Yeah.
is a full interview. Sometimes it's a clip from an interview. But in terms of interviews, we've done so many. One of the podcast interviews that stand out to me, I'll definitely say is, I think my conversation with Consume Shop was very interesting. Consume Shop. So they're like a rapid delivery startup in Accra. So they claim to be able to deliver within Accra, anywhere in Accra. Not anywhere, but I think certain locations in Accra within 60 minutes of upon delivery. And then, you know,
that's wild claim,
like,
innit?
Yeah. And I'm like, well, it doesn't take 60 minutes to deliver to somewhere in Accra, because if you get stuck in traffic, what happens? What if the car breaks down? There's so many variables working against you. How can you guarantee 60 minutes? But anyway, they claim to do it. That conversation, you know, that was a very good, interesting one, because they came from, I think they were living in Germany, and I think they moved to America, and I think they moved back to Europe, and then they moved to Ghana because, you know, they were passionate about their country, and then they realized that they were able to use their Western education and their Western jobs. I think they both had jobs at very good tech companies, etc. And I think it was this husband and wife tag team, and they were able to come together in Ghana and launch, you know, like their own kind of like version of maybe Jumia, or maybe I wouldn't say Bolt Food, because Bolt Food is more takeaways, but they were able to, you know, come up with this delivery startup where they can deliver goods. I think more like a what do you call it?
Uber Eats or
not Uber Eats. I think Getir,
Getir,
the delivery grocery delivery service here in the UK, for example. But in Ghana, you got like Jumia and other people who do something similar.
Yeah.
So their story is very interesting because you know they went through, you know, different, you know, interesting experiences, and you know, they lived at different countries, and then they realized that, you know, I think all roads led to Accra, where they can kind of like set up something and use their expertise, their knowledge to kind of like try and contribute something to the city. I mean, that's one that stands out to me. But honestly, Atto, I've had so many interesting conversations. It's hard to say this one conversation was absolutely mind blowing, but I think, of course, the other conversation I had with Darren was amazing. Yeah, Darren Bonds, you know, entrepreneur, came to Ghana with pretty much nothing. And, you know, 10 years later, he's pretty much, you know, achieved all he can achieve as an entrepreneur in Accra.
That's mad inspirational, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Gosh, that's like the dream, right? And a lot of people, you see, this is, you know what I love about your podcast, right? Is that you're not only giving a great perspective on Black entrepreneurs and creatives and professionals, but you're also giving a great perspective on Ghanaians, also Africans, right? That, you know, because a lot of people, I feel like they have this perception of Africa that, oh, what can you do there? What can you achieve there? Well, there's Millionaires there. Isn't the richest Black person? Where's he from? Do you know what I mean? A lot of people don't even deep this. Yes, we know there's other issues, but I'm not talking about the issues right now. Everywhere in the world has issues, right? But I love that we're giving it a different perspective, instead of the perspective of, you know, oh, pull me. Let's just, you know, we're just, you know, we've got a lot of resources out there. We've got a lot of capabilities out there. Yeah. You know, we've got a lot of talent out there, right? And we've got, in my opinion, we've probably got the most opportunity that you can get out there. You know, if you can figure out the right thing, you know. So I love that your podcast is shedding a light on this, because it's very valuable. Do you know what I mean? It's very, very valuable to see that and, you know, be inspired.
Very valuable.
By that.
I had someone who dropped me a DM a few weeks ago and said that they're basing their university dissertation or essay on my episodes.
Really? Wow, you see? I was going to ask you what's the reception been so far, but yeah, what is the reception been so far?
It's been I think mind-blowing. There's so many stories I could share. There's a couple of short stories I will share. So there's one story about I did an interview with Live in Ghana. So they're like letting agents in Accra, if you will. So for short lets, long-term lets, and medium-term lets. So shout out to Living Ghana. If you guys need, you know, all of that good stuff, you know, reach out to them. And you know, I did an interview with them. And this interview, I do not expect it to perform the way it performed, right? Like, I think, like, you know, like it's done really well on YouTube, and the downloads are pretty good as well. And, you know, I've been getting messages from, you know, one of the co-founders saying, hey, Adrian, since you come on episodes, we've been getting lots of inquiries. And there's one particular guy who, he's from the US. He's going to fly in to view in a property. It's crazy just because of that episode.
Wow.
It's crazy. And there's just so many stories. You know, I get personal messages from people saying, oh, Adrian, look, you know, thank you for sharing the lessons of, you know, of what you learned from doing 100 episodes of Sound of Accra. It's really valuable for me. I'll get another message, you know, talking about, you know, how, you know, it's changed their life and how they listen to it religiously. And there's one particular story I think that I'll never forget. So there's a man called Kevin Brereton. I don't know if you've heard about him. So he's a 5 times world champion kickboxer.
Okay.
Yeah, Hollywood actor. He's been in some Hollywood films, and he's like an author recently. And now he's a TEDx speaker because he released a TEDx talk this week. No, not this week. I think last year. Sorry, or not this year. Sorry. And he randomly stumbled upon my podcast. I don't know how. He was like, Adrian, my name's Adrian. My name is Kevin Brereton. And at this period, I was looking for a season 2 finale guest. Right? He filled out the form on the website. So he was like, Adrian, my name's Kevin. You know, I live in LA. I was born in England, raised in LA. My mother is English. My dad is Ghanaian. I could never find my father. I've achieved, you know, all these things in my life. I love to come on your show and talk about it. I was like, Kevin, you've come at the right time because I'm looking for a season 2 finale guest. Let's do a live show talking about your journey. And then I think on the live show, I think we had maybe almost 100 people turn up live. Wow. It was great. We had people call in from around the world saying, you know, Kevin, you're amazing. I love that. Yeah, he sent me a copy of his book. I think the name of his book is called The Heart of an African Champion or something like that. And yeah, he just literally talks about his story, you know, becoming an actor, becoming a kickboxing champion, me and Muhammad Ali and all these different people. Yeah, mind blowing.
Look at that, the impact.
Yeah.
You see, you never know when you've got the right vision.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me not say right vision. You've got a vision, and you've got a purpose, you've got a vision, and you do things for the what I'm trying to say is you do the right things.
Yeah.
For the right reasons instead of for money.
Yeah.
Right? You're doing it because this is what you're passionate about. You feel like it's your purpose. You've got a vision. I feel like when you do it that way, I feel like good things, you know, come to you. I feel like that's like the law of attraction, right?
Yeah.
So talking about credibility as a podcaster, wow, it's tough. It's really tough to do that, right? So, you know, and for you, it's even more interesting because you're in the UK building credibility in Africa with listeners in Africa. So I guess, can you give us insight into how you did that or how you think you did that?
Okay, so building credibility, you know, so we're talking about building credibility outside of the West, within Africa itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what, it's actually, you know, working out. You know, I've had, you know, a few inquiries from, you know, podcasters and content creators within the continent and within the country who wanted to collaborate and wanted me to speak at certain events. So there was actually a panel event in Accra that I was asked to speak at, and, you know, I wasn't available, so I wasn't able to attend. So, but it's great that I'm getting a recognition, which I was happy about. You understand? I've had, what else have I had? So I've had, basically, you know, podcasters, YouTubers reach out and wanted to do interviews. So, you know, we've done interviews and they wanted to learn my perspective on certain things. In terms of the Sound of Accra as well, a lot of the youth, you know, they're listening to it and they're really inspired, and they're saying, Adrian, could you mentor me, Adrian? You know, could you help me find a job, and all of these different things. Like, we get lots of LinkedIn messages, you know, asking, you know, for mentorship and jobs. And you know, I'll tell you this, there was one particular time where I finished recording an episode for season 5 in Accra, and I was walking to the car of my guest, and there was a security guard who said, hello sir, please, I'm begging you for a job. I know I'm got this job, but I need a proper job, basically. And I said, look, I'm working on something, maybe there's something I can help you with, you know, in the future. And then my guest said, look, what you need is the skills to acquire the skills that will be able to attract to you the job or the money that you need to provide for your family. Because he had a family, I think he had a wife and kids and stuff, and he was desperate for a job. Like, when you go out there, I'm sure you've been to Africa, you some to certain places, some certain people, you see that they're desperate. You can see in their eyes that they're desperate for an opportunity, and they've got families to provide for, and what they're earning, you understand, in a month, we could spend it in a day or even in an hour or even in a minute or a second. It's so ridiculous. And when I got into the car, I was like, I need to set up a mentorship program and a job program for all of these people in Ghana and maybe eventually across Africa who are desperate for jobs, who are desperate for a break in opportunities and have the skills or the drive in order to get there. So that's some of the impact that's been making. People have been watching the episode and they've been inspired, and they want me and the team and guests to help them out. Understands. And then we also got invited to Change Africa podcast live. I think it was Africa Podcast Day, I think at the beginning of the year. And I think we got invited to Change Africa podcast on their Twitter Spaces handle.
Wow.
To join the panel just to talk about, I think, podcasting in general in Africa, on the continent. So it was really, an honor to be invited to that. So yeah, we're making some kind of impact on the continent, and more importantly amongst the youth and people that need to hear it.
Yeah, I love to hear that. And this, is important. This is why I say, like, you just never know who's listening to you. And it's strange, not strange, but it's interesting when people come up to you, like, oh yeah, I listen to your podcast. You're like, all right, yeah, thank you. And you're a humble guy. I know that you have the right responses and you want to really, really help people, which is why you do what you do. Monetization, right, is like something that a lot of people look at, like in podcasting. At what point did you start to look at monetization for the Sound of Accra?
So I think for me, monetization was something that I started to look at, I think, from season 2.
Okay.
And I looked at it from an indirect level. I was like, when I finished season 2 of the podcast, I was like, the way my downloads are looking like at the moment, I'm not going to be monetized like by ads for quite some time. Let me find an indirect way to monetize my podcast. So what ended up happening was that after I did season 2, I had a lot of demand for people wanting to learn how to podcast. So what I did is that I built a podcast course in 2020, towards the end of 2020, and I used my podcast as a case study for the podcast, which helped me to build a podcast course. And I couldn't have done it without being a practitioner and having a practical experience to be able to go out and teach people how I've achieved certain obstacles and how I've done what I've done. Okay. So that course has generated me thousands of dollars, which is great. So I've been able to monetize it indirectly. And then after season 3, I realized that I was able to monetize, through sponsors. So season 3, I got my first sponsor, Ice Cream and Ting, a premium.
Oh yeah, we had them. Shout out Ice Cream and Ting.
So shout out.
Yeah, we had them we had them because I did not know that. Mad. I was speaking to Lucinda the other day actually. Yeah.
He's a good friend.
I love that. Mad. You see, look at that.
He actually, because he's a podcast himself, and he actually.
Yeah, he said
he's one of the people that inspired me to get into podcasting alongside Pat Flynn, an American podcaster.
Right.
And then maybe 1 or 2 other people. I think those people inspired me to actually get into it.
Wow, this is so crazy. You see, we were going to meet either way. We were going to have to. Even if we didn't meet at a podcast show, we would have had to meet through Lucinda. He was telling me that he's looking to restart his podcast soon again. Yeah, shout out. That is mad.
Got a podcast on this.
Okay. Okay, cool. So sorry to interrupt. So you got sponsored by Ice Cream and Ting, yeah?
Yeah, so sponsored by Ice Cream and Ting, season 3. And then when it came to season 4, I got approached by one of my previous guests, H&M Naturals, to sponsor season 4. So they sponsored season 4. It's organic skincare line, based in Canada, but created by Ghanaians.
Okay.
They're doing really well. They're in Walmart, etc. And funny enough, when they came on my podcast in season 1, Google reached out to them and they wanted them to feature them in Black History Month. So that was another great testimony I can mention. When I did season 4, when season 4 was rolling, and I think when first episode, the second episode had came out, we got a DM from a tech founder in Ghana, and he wanted to sponsor season 5. So since season 3, we've had literally sponsor after sponsor, literally coming to us,
Okay.
which has been great.
Wow.
So yeah, sponsorship, podcast course, and consultation. That's been an avenue of monetization.
Yeah.
And then I'll say there's so many ways. I mean, another way I'll recommend people monetize their podcast is affiliates, right? Partner is getting affiliate links. So if you have a guest, for example, who comes in the show that has a product or service, partner up with them, have a special, maybe do like a special website landing page, get a special link from them, and then do a negotiation with them. Hey, if I have a special link, and if every time someone clicks and buys through this link, I get a percentage of yourselves, can I work in this way? And if they say yes, then yeah, man, absolutely go for it.
Yeah.
We did this with VTI London in season 4. Shout out to William Adwasi. He gave us a special code for our listeners to go and buy his watches. Did I want to take any of the profits? No. I mean, I actually said, you know what, let's just give this to this. I don't want the profits from this particular episode. Let's just let people purchase the watches, because I know a portion of his profits to go to helping kids in Africa, buying school uniform and putting the lights on in their villages, their towns, their schools, etc. So I knew I was giving back.
Okay, wow, I love that. And thanks for those monetization, and it just shows that you don't have to hit a certain threshold on YouTube to do that. You can find other genius ways. And a real gem that you said, and I don't know if everybody caught that, is the fact that a lot of the brands that you were working with are brands that fit very well with the types of listeners that you have, which is why they're willing to. It's like we were actually speaking about the episode. We were speaking about this. So we had somebody called Maz, who has a marketing agency, and we were talking about that. His episode got released on Monday. I was
listening to it. I've watched the episode. I watched some of it. Yeah.
So we were talking about that and how I think Gary Vee mentioned it, and targeting is a little bit. Not cheaper, but it's cheaper than like maybe just doing a random YouTube ad or Google ad or whatever. And you can just target a certain niche of people. And I think that's a real gem. Like if you make a podcast, I don't know about your love of watches. Of course, watch companies are going to be like, well, most of the people that are listening, you might not have like 500,000 people listening.
Yeah.
You might have 1,000 people listening, but they're going to all be people that love watches. That's very valuable, rather than, okay, it's like 100,000 people, and then there's only like 100 people that really care about watches. I don't care about this.
Yeah.
Why are you talking about this? You get what I'm saying? So yeah, it's very, 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 very important. In your journey though, as a podcaster, what mistakes do you think that you've made that you will tell your younger self to avoid?
Oh, absolutely. There's loads of them. Loads of mistakes I've made. Some of the mistakes I've been able to teach in the course, and I'm glad I made this mistake so I can teach people to avoid going down certain routes. One mistake I made was when I started the video course. When I started the video podcast in season 2, that's when I first started doing video in 2020, was that always have, like a runner or like someone around you to help you on site. Because things can go wrong if you try and do everything yourself. Absolutely can't recommend it anymore that you get someone to help you on site, unless you're maybe recording in a studio which has a producer and maybe like an engineer and a runner or someone to help you set up the sound and audio and video before you kind of like do your own thing to make sure everything is running. I'll tell you one reason why. I did an episode of Mika Abraham, a Ghanaian creative, and essentially I set up the camera, the audio, everything. And then what happened is at the end of the episode, I realized that I didn't press record on the Sony camcorder, but I had an iPad recording in as a second angle, as a backup. So I was only able to upload clips of her in terms of video, for the podcast, and I had all of the audio, which is great. So definitely have someone on site to help make sure that the podcast is being recorded properly and actually gets recorded. And I had this similar issue in Ghana as well when I was recording as well, like just to make sure that everything's recorded properly, to oversee everything. Another mistake I'll make is don't buy or pay for reviews or subscribers, whatever it is, right? Now I've never paid for any subscribers or anything like that, but one thing I did pay for Atto is reviews. I tried paying for reviews I think a year or two ago, and that backfired because what happened was that I think Apple Podcasts, they see when it's paid, they see when it's fake, and then they take it with you. So you can pay people, you can get maybe someone, maybe Fiverr or Upwork or something, you know, because you get a lot. Sometimes I get a lot of DMs in LinkedIn from a lot of, you know, people saying, "Oh, we can pay, we can do this, we can do that, we can."
Okay.
You know, so what you can do sometimes is some people will approach you saying, "Hey, if you pay us, we can get you subscribers, we can get you views, we can get you."
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And because it's not organic and it's artificial, the platforms are smart enough to pick up on that, and they will either penalize you or they'll take those reviews away. So essentially, I think I spent about maybe almost £100 on trying to get, you know, fake reviews. Confession made, you listeners.
Fair enough. Hey, look, it takes I'm glad that you're honest about that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I paid because I knew if I got more reviews, I'd get more downloads.
Okay.
But what actually ended up happening was that all those fake reviews got taken down eventually, and I promised myself I'm never gonna pay for any type of organic, you know, traffic or subscribers or downloads or reviews. I'm gonna earn those, you know, all of that, all of this metrics by working hard and giving value to my listeners.
Yeah. You know what? Thank you for being honest about that, because I think that is we want to rush things. And you know what's so interesting, right?
What's that?
The review thing, right? I've never paid for reviews. I've never paid for views or none of that stuff. But what I have done is I have done prize draws.
You know what?
To encourage reviews.
What have you done?
I've done prize draws to encourage
prize draws, yeah. That's all right.
To encourage reviews. So I think that's a way to, I've only done it once, but I think it's a nice way to kind of reward your listeners. Because I've done it through if you're listening, come on. If you like it, give me a review, you'll be entered into a prize draw. So I found that to be a useful way. But you know what? I'm happy that you were honest about your mistakes, because some people wouldn't be honest about it. But then it also shows how difficult it is to make it as a podcaster, right? You know, it's very, very challenging.
It's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
If you really want to take it seriously, like a business, or you want it to be like your full-time thing, there's so many moving parts. If you want to be a hobbyist, then just record, pull out a podcast whenever you feel like it, and don't worry about all of the, you know, little details.
Yeah, you know what? Look, podcast is not for the faint-hearted. You know, it's not for the faint-hearted.
It's not, man.
And are you doing it full time now?
Full time ish now. Yes. Full-time ish now. I'm doing a bit of consulting at the moment, so that's taking a bit of time. But I am, you know, outside of my consulting is just podcasting. Yeah, that's all it is. Yeah.
And you mentioned that you have a community, right? So talk to us about that community and how can people join if they're interested in it.
Yeah, sure. So we have the podcasters community. So we have the A to Z podcasting community. People can join by heading over to A to Z. That's the letter A, 2, Z. You know, as in letter A, so that's TOZ community. What am I talking about? A to Z podcasting.com/community. That's where you can join. I'm sure, you know, I'll give Atto that link. You can put it in the description. So the community is basically, it's a place for beginner podcasters and growing podcasters to keep up with what's going on in the world of podcasting, and to, you know, learn more about podcasting so that they can, you know, be the best podcaster that they possibly can. So you've got content in there, you know, diving into AI tools. You got content in there, you know, me showing you how certain tools work. You got content in there, you know, giving, you know, like free guides on podcasting, workshop recordings that I've done, you know, as much value and content as I possibly can in there. And then you've got people who are networking as well.
Okay.
So you got podcasters around the world who are networking with each other.
Yeah.
You know, this person's got this podcast and this this podcast, this person's got that podcast. So you got podcasters helping each other, and you got podcasters going on each other's podcasts as guests. For example, I've got a podcaster who joined my community who is a fit for one of my new podcasts. So he's actually going to come on my new podcast, and we're going to have a chat about it. So yeah, almost anything and everything about podcasting, you know, we discuss and create content about it. So
love that. Yeah, I'll definitely add in the description as well.
Excellent.
So we talked a lot about podcasting today. We talked about how difficult it is. We talked about the challenges and the struggles. Right now, podcasting is blown up more, I feel like, this year than it has in 2020, 2021, 2022. Everybody's got a podcast. I see video clips all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I'm all for it. Like, I'm all for people being creative, expressing themselves, you know, all of that. But I guess, what's your thoughts on like the current state of the podcasting industry, having been in it for such a long time?
Yeah, I think it's exciting because a lot more people are getting into it, which means there's also a lot more reason to become a better podcaster, so that, you know, you don't slack off. You're more driven to work harder so that you can be the best podcaster you can, and, you know, stay miles ahead of your competition if you have any competition. It's also exciting because more people are getting into it. So, for example, like NBA teams even having their own dedicated podcast, which is great.
NBA players
as well, NBA players. So it's an interesting time. So more people are getting into it, which is exciting. More ad money's going into it. I think it was is it $1.5 billion dollars worth of podcast advertising revenue spend last year. So more money going into the industry means more money for us, which is great for those of us who are trying to monetize our podcast. But it's also an eye-opening time where you're also seeing there's a series of celebrity podcasters who have signed deals with people like Spotify that didn't work out too well, like, and as a result, Spotify,
Meghan and Harry, 20 mil.
Yep.
I was like, mad. 20 mil.
So Spotify is realizing that they're taking a step back in terms of the amount of money they're pumping into it. They've realized the formula isn't just, you know, getting a celebrity in front of a mic and, you know, giving them a Spotify exclusive show. That's not, that formula doesn't necessarily work. And that's why I'm really excited about this, because podcasting is going to be about the talent and the voice rather than the name behind it. It's leveled the playing field for podcasters who are podcasting out their bedrooms, who have a voice, who want to amplify their opinions to the world. And also finally AI and tools that are out there that are being released. Very exciting to see how it's going to make our lives easier as podcasters and producers, to really automate and to be able to increase the amount of content and the quality of content that we pull out there on a regular basis.
It's honestly, you're right. I think we've seen a huge amount of celebrities again. Look, I'm all for everybody voicing their opinions, but like you said, I think like what's almost happened is that because podcasting is a hot thing, it's like everybody who was a content creator or who's still a content creator just feels, let me just bolt on a podcast. Let me just use my huge following and now do a podcast because that's the popping medium. Like TikTok was a popping medium, and I need to get, and you're absolutely right. I think at the end of the day, right, like you said, it's the quality, right? The cream will rise to the top at the end of the day, right? The value will rise to the top at some point. So we've talked about, podcasting being very difficult. And actually, I got some notes from a Reddit, post. And I was trying to find the source of it. The source was from some podcaster. So, guys, if you want to take this with a pinch of salt, please take it with a pinch of salt if you want to. But in 2021, right, they were saying that there were 2 million podcasts published, right? And they said that 90% of podcasts don't go past episode 3. So basically, they're saying that 1.8 million people quit by that time, right? Which I can understand. I do know a lot of people that have done like 1 or 2 episodes and they've kind of quit because they've realized how, difficult it is, right? And then they said to be in the top 1% of podcasts in the world, you only need to publish 21 episodes of your podcast, which is crazy, right? So you're 1%er. You're 1%er. I'm a 1%er.
We are.
So, you know, that gives you an understanding of the level of difficulty, you know, to be consistent, that many people are quitting after, you know, 3 episodes. So I guess my question to you is, what advice would you give to someone wanting to start their own podcast in 2023?
I love that question. I love that you brought that up. I'm excited about that question. Yeah, I think you probably will know what I'm going to say is being consistent and get it into it for the right reasons. Take it as a marathon and not a sprint. You know, Sound of Accra has been around for almost 4 years, and even then, it's taken me to get to that point before starting a new podcast. You know, quit and switch. But what I would advise is to be consistent and to, you know, don't, you know, worry about, you know, what people say. Don't worry about the number of downloads that you get when you first start, and, you know, whatever, right? Just focus on, you know, producing the best content, being consistent, and thinking how you can continually improve the show, and then maybe give it at least 100 episodes and then see, you know, how the response is. If you're not getting a response that you want by 100 episodes, then maybe you can hang up the mic and walk away. I know someone who used to do the Black Millennial Money podcast. I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've heard of the podcast.
Yeah. I can't remember his name. But anyway, he hung up the mic after 100 episodes and said, "Hey guys, I'm done with this anymore, and I'm gonna walk away and pursue something else." And then when he said that, I was like, fair play to him, because the guy was super consistent every week without fail. The guy will have his Skype headphones on a podcast, even though I don't advise doing a podcast with a Skype type headset, but it was funny. He made it work, you know, understand? But yeah, be consistent, get into it for passion and for purpose, not necessarily for profit. And always be passionate about how you can continue to improve. Don't worry about the downloads. Don't worry about the vanity metrics at the beginning. You know, worry about that later. If you can get sponsorship before you've even launched, great. There's ways to do that. You can reach out to me. We can talk about that. But focus on getting consistent, get perfect, just get better. And then the rest will take care of itself.
I love that. I love that tip. I've got another question for you before we wrap up, right? So you said that you have people who have 100,000 downloads, right?
Yeah.
Those are your students, right?
Mm-hmm.
I guess, what insights have you seen from them that has helped them get to that? Let me not say level, but get to that number.
Yeah. So a few things. So one is the type of niche that they're in.
Okay.
So for example, if you're talking about Africa rather than just Ghana, you're bound to have a bigger listenership, right? But at the same time, if there's a lot of people talking about Africa, then there's more competition and you may not get the viewership or the downloads that you want. So that's one. The type of niche that you choose can, of course, maybe open doors for you, by itself. Two is interviews. So when your podcast is focused around doing interviews, and it's focused around doing interviews with people who are producing the type of content that you want to listen to, different areas, and maybe they have a good following themselves, and you partner up with them when you're promoting your episodes, and they are actually pushing your episodes as well together. That helps as well to really get a lot of views and downloads as well. So I do recommend, working out a plan with each guest, when you're releasing each episode in terms of promoting it together. When the guest is just as invested in promoting it as much as you are, it can do amazing things. And I've seen that with my own podcast. I could tell stories all day about that. So yeah, it's the type of podcast it is, especially the interview format, the niche that it's in as well. And it's also I say the branding as well is really important. We're now in an age where there's so many agencies. You saw that at the podcast show, where there's so many podcast agencies out there who focus on making branded podcasts.
Yeah.
When I was at the podcast show last year, that was not the case. Now this year, because podcasts is even bigger, now there's more agencies around. But at the same time, some of these agencies are saying that we don't have as much demand anymore because now the market's now more saturated. So branded podcast is another thing. So what I'm also saying is that the brand, how good the brand is, like the artwork, how well it looks, not even just the brand virtually. I mean visually also, audibly, like how the podcast sounds, your production. If it sounds really good quality, then you're gonna attract a certain type of audience, especially when you're getting people listen to your episode for the first time. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's been great speaking to you. What do you have planned next for yourself?
Yeah, so you may have heard me mention of a new podcast called Quit and Switch. So we got a number of episodes in the bank already. So I'm focused on continuing to release. That's a weekly show. Continuing to build upon that, and then hopefully within 12 months I can maybe sell it to someone like LinkedIn or something like that, which is the ambition.
Man with a plan.
And then A to Z podcasting, we're gonna be hopefully running some cohorts training online, throughout the summer. So if anyone wants to learn how to podcast over a 6-week course and needs some hand holding, we can help. A to Z podcasting.com.
Amazing. Where can people find you? So you mentioned A to Z.com, your Instagram handles, your TikTok handles.
Yeah, best thing is adriandaniels.co. That's my website. You got all the links in there. adriandaniels.co, not .com. But yeah, I'm also on Instagram. Just search for Adrian Daniels. LinkedIn, just search for Adrian Daniels. Be able to find me on there. Twitter, Mr. A Daniels. I don't use it as much, but I'm looking at revamping that.
Amazing. Any final words, listeners?
Yeah, if you don't have a podcast, start one. If you don't, then what are you doing? It's a massive opportunity that there's to be taken advantage of, and there's a huge movement taking place in podcasting. Get into it now. I'm glad I got into it before it started to become mainstream. Get into it now while you can, because it's only going to get bigger and better.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, being honest, vulnerable, and just telling us about the highs and lows of podcasting. And not just that, but you wanting to get into the music career, you moving through, from Ghana to the UK, different parts of London. It's quite amazing actually where somebody comes from and where they get to.
Yeah.
And how they kind of still follow their passions in a way. You're not doing music, but you're still creative, and you're not that far off music. Even musicians are kind of doing podcasts now. Yeah. They're appearing on podcasts really as well, right? Yeah. They're starting their own podcast.
Yeah.
So it's just like another form of that. So yeah, no, it's really amazing to see.
Yeah.
And Sound of Accra, man, like I've told you, like offline, like I'm like fully supportive of that. Yeah, got to keep making sure that I plug that as much as I can.
Appreciate it.
Watchers and listeners, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of Take Up Experience. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next week.